We had one TV in our house and it had like 5 channels. Yeah, and I was the remote. And then you had to tune into that channel after midnight. It played the national anthem and y'all had to actually talk to one another, right? In today's world, you don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to. In fact, kids get consumed into their devices and they don't know how to deal with things. Even when it comes to sports, right? They don't want nobody to lose. Somebody losing, right? And so you got to be able to deal with loss, no matter what it is, a game or what have you. So I'm honored to have this panel of esteemed men and women to be able to talk about suicide prevention and how you deal with loss, and whether that's a game or someone in your life, right? And so thank you, panel. I'm going to give the mic over to Miguel to introduce the panel. But thank you. Let's give him a round of applause.
All right, thank you, Donnell. Quick introductions, and I'm not going to introduce everyone, they can do it themselves, but for myself, my name is Miguel Sierra. I am the Suicide Prevention Program Manager at Fort Meade. I am also the Suicide Prevention Director for the Black Veterans Empowerment Council, and I am a proud VGA member, man. I've been around for a couple of years now. I used to be the DJ on Saturdays, and y'all laugh, but I had it popping in here. You better ask somebody. And now I just come in as much as I can to support this beautiful community. So, yeah, that's me. Millie.
Hi, I'm Millie Frank. I actually used to be the Suicide Prevention Program Manager at Fort Belvoir. In the military, in my old previous life, I was a behavioral health specialist or a mental health specialist, certified drug and alcohol specialist as well. And now I work for Headquarters Department of the Army, doing measurability assessments and focused evaluations, risk management on all of the Army prevention programs. And still advocating for suicide prevention, as you see.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Ariel Jordan. I have a private practice where I focus on trauma and PTSD, any complex trauma. I've been doing this work for about 10 years. I worked at Walter Reed, I've worked in group homes, I've worked in the court system, and I've worked in methadone clinics. And one thing that they all have in common is trauma. And so this work is very meaningful to me because we just don't talk about it enough. We don't have enough knowledge for us to pass on to our friends and our family members and try to prevent this thing. So that's my journey here and why I love to do these kind of things.
Hold on, tell them what you're doing next. Tell them about the little speaking engagement you got next. Please, go ahead, tell them.
Wait, oh.
How you gonna forget?
Oh, okay.
She's trying to be humble.
Okay, so yeah, so I just got selected to do a TEDx talk. The topic is becoming. So one of the things that I say to people all the time, and especially suicide prevention, is that we're always becoming, and that's where some hope can come from. So although we survive, we're not always here. And so that's what my talk is going to be about in a couple months. Thank you, guys.
Okay, I can't top that. I'm Brian Sanders. I am a retired Army Command Sergeant Major. Been 26 years. Out of those 26, 21 of them were, Afghanistan and Iraq. So with that being said, experienced a lot. Had a lot of battle buddies, family members. I mean, you name it. We experienced a lot when it comes to the topic we're going to discuss tonight. I'm now a contractor supporting a mission at the Pentagon right now. I'll just leave it at that for right now. But I met this young man, Miguel Sierra. Well, this old guy to my far right. I met him on Fort Meade in my last assignment as Command Sergeant Major. And part of the discussion tonight is what got us here. Because as a senior leader, I shared my story. And I think that was kind of a game changer because I didn't know what I was doing when I did it, but he recognized it. And that's something we'll probably touch on a little bit tonight. But I'm glad to be here, and it's even better to see you all this evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. So this is part 2 of a conversation we started back in September, in which we focused on suicide prevention, understanding what prevention actually looks like. And I don't know if everybody wasn't there, the faces are new here, but today the conversation is going to shift a little bit, right, and progress. And now we're going to discuss some barriers, right, to getting help. All right, we discussed suicide prevention as a community, as a responsibility of self and to each other. Today we're going to look at some of the things that can keep a person from actually going to get help when needed. Make sense? All right? So the first question from our panelists is, what are some of the barriers that you guys have seen, some of the reasons or excuses that people give for not going to get help for behavioral health issues, mental health issues?
I mean, I'll jump on that first. Pride and ego. Pride and ego. I'm telling you right now, I can't stress that enough tonight. Pride is the devil. I know a lot of us have heard that expression, but I can speak, firsthand. My pride and my ego didn't allow me to seek help, right? Especially me being a guy that's been in special operations around all these warriors, all these, alpha masculine, men or whatever. Like, who am I to, tell somebody I got a problem, right? Who am I to be the guy that's at the top of my game, doing what I'm doing? What does that look like, right? There was nobody in my world that could tell me admitting that I had an issue or trying to go get help was the right thing to do. I think we probably just started doing that in the last few years. We just started doing that and making it a new normal. But, during my time when I came up, I mean, my father's a Vietnam vet, right? So I think a lot of you who know the Vietnam era, just that stockpile right there of people that come from the era, they're not getting no help from nobody. You better figure it out. And so that's what I was raised to believe. And so I took that same energy into the Army. Coincidentally, I was around the same kind of men who come from the same kind of generational trauma of not talking about problems. It ain't cool to talk about problems. You figure it out, you tough it out, you thug it out, and you get after it and get it done. So the barriers, I think, for me, like I said, are pride and ego.
Yeah, I think for me, what I see a lot is that access to care is one of them. There are sites like OpenPath where you can go and get like a therapy session for like $40 if you don't have insurance, but people don't know that. There are people who won't go to the VA for whatever reason, many reasons, but also when they do, I hear about a lot of turnover. So now that I'm seeking the help, I have to now say this again to another provider and start all over again. So there's that comes up. And I think that in addition to access, culture, finding somebody that will understand that I don't have to explain my culture to. And so for me, one of the things that I do is I'm a counselor educator as well. So I make sure that that's part of the conversation always. Because the one thing that people need when they do start is to feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, then they're not going to talk to you about the real issues. So for me, that's how I try to do my part, but also what I see, when it comes to like why people won't come.
So there's several dynamics that happen when we're talking about people not going to seek help. What I've experienced at Belvoir was we had people who wanted to get help. Once, I did the trainings and I'm like, hey, if you got, it's okay to not be okay, but seek help. And then they go get help and they're like, Miss Millie, I went and there's no available appointments for 60 days. So that right there is a turn off. My own experiences for myself have been where it has been very dismissive. There's really, like, are you sure that you're depressed, or are you sure that you're having this? As if my traumas, my pain was insignificant in comparison to some of my counterparts. So I think that, the dynamics as far as why people choose not to go get care is when you have somebody who sits in front of you and diminishes what you're going through, it really puts things in a space of, is this really important? Because apparently they're not taking me serious enough. And we see that a lot today in society.
Thank you all. And I want to add to that a little bit, right? A lot of times, getting help feels selfish, right? as a leader, and I'm not even speaking military, right? I'm just speaking in general. As a father, as a mom, as a mentor, as somebody people look up to, as the alpha male or alpha female in your circles. Sometimes it feels like going to get help is taking you away from people that might need you, right? And what ends up happening is we justify not getting help because we say, oh, well, they need me more. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, you're running on fumes, right? I've also seen this place where, specific to the military now, to the Army, where I remember being E5, E4, E5 at Fort Belvoir. And I was a member of the basketball team, the post basketball team. And I was the junior rank, but I was like the man, you know what I'm saying? A basketball player, right? So, and my teammates were, infantrymen, MPs, somebody back there from the Walter Reed team has something else to say, but we beat them every time we played them, but that's another story for another day. But I remember a lot of my teammates, right, which were lieutenant colonels, majors, sergeant majors, first sergeants, second first classes, when they found out what I did for work, I was a behavioral health specialist also. And I would go to the units and teach that class on suicide prevention, right? And they would hear me talk about it. So Miguel does that, Science Sierra does that. And I had a bunch of senior leaders feel more comfortable opening up to an E5 in their office than taking that walk to behavioral health because they didn't want to be seen, right, as problematic, as undependable, whatever it is. It's not even a word, is it? Undependable? What's the word? Unreliable, right? They don't want to be looked at as weak, essentially, right? So you feel more comfortable opening up about your deployment issues and the nightmares you're having to an E5 than it is to a doctor because of the stigma, right? And that's what I want to get at, right? All the things that we're discussing can be rounded up into stigma, right? Stigma are things that keep a person from going to get help. Stigmas are things that get in the way of people actually getting the help they need. A lot of times they'll look like reasons you don't get help, but the reality is they become excuses, all right? Now, when you look at stigma, it's important to understand that it comes from somewhere, right? Like not all stigma is unjustified. If you've been in the Army or any service long enough, you know that at some point, stigma kept you employed, right? Like, it's just what it was, all right? But as we process it all, it's important for us to understand it so that we can fight it. Am I making sense with this? So there are two types of stigmas that I want to focus on today in today's conversation, which are self-stigma and public stigma, all right? Self-stigma is stigma that is internalized, that is a part of you, okay? It's very hard to shake that off, okay, because it kind of ingrained in you. And public stigma is stigma that comes from the outside in, right? So public stigma is going to be more so of environments, what society tells you should and shouldn't do. So I would like to ask my panelists, what are some examples that you got? Let's focus on public stigma first, because I think it's a little bit easier to dissect, right? What are some of the examples of public stigmas that either you've experienced yourself or that you've seen out there in your work? Millie, I'll go with you first.
So, excuse me, what I've seen as public stigma is where, for the military, and I'm reflecting back to the Army, but even for civilians who work for the government and have security clearances. So one of the things that I used to always hear from my folks that I would train and talk to and try to encourage to seek help is, well, Millie, if I go to behavioral health or I seek help from EAP or I go to, a psychologist, psychiatrist, I'm gonna lose my security clearance. My aviation folks, if I go to seek help, they're gonna ground me. And for pilots, for those of you that don't know, they have to have a certain amount of hours of flight hours, night flights, day flights. If not, they lose their certifications. MPs, Miss Millie, I can't go because if I go, they're gonna take my weapon. MPs have to have a weapon to be an MP. And so we're looking at MOSs now, right? So mental health. Why would I go to the people that I work with? Unethical. How do I talk to the psychiatrist that I actually work and share cases with? I have to speak to this person that I actually am working for. So again, when we look at stigma, it starts to become to the point where, you know, we're seeing people losing their credentialings. We're seeing them lose their security clearances, but people do not know the whole story of why the individual lost the security clearance. You know, it wasn't necessarily because they went to get help. It may have been that there was something organically happening where the decision-making process could have been compromised. And that's why they lost the security clearances based on what job they did. 'Cause can you imagine this, someone, a nuclear physicist, and they're having something going on that's organic, and they're not taken out of that area, and they're over here messing with nuclear bombs? So we have to think of it from different perspectives. I always say, you know, I used to tell my soldiers when I was a soldier, the cup can be half full and half empty. How many of you have heard that saying before? I always say, this is a true statement, but the reality is, it depends who's pouring and who's drinking. Because that's the real perception. So again, stigma on the public side of the house is what deters a lot of people from doing a lot of things. Stigma is the dream killer.
Thank you, Millie.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking about this meme that I keep seeing sometimes. People will say, I can't tell my therapist what I'm really thinking because they'll put me in those grippy sides.
Oh, you posted that. I think that was you that posted it?
No, but I've
Somebody
seen
posted
it
that.
so many times, right? And it's funny. I mean, I'm gonna chuckle at it, right? But that's the last thing therapists want to do, right? And so when I'm speaking to my clients, because there is a public stigma, that's the ongoing joke about the grippy sides, right? But we need to talk about suicide, and if you can't talk about it in your therapy appointment, where can you talk about it? But the last thing I want to do as a therapist is call for a wellness check or have somebody admit it. So for me, this is the space where we talk about it, but we just talk about, like, if you cannot guarantee me your safety, then I'm going to intervene so I can get you the help that you need. So I think that for me, it's more about the education when people come in, or in settings like this. Let's still talk about it, you know, and let's talk about the parameters here. Can I talk about this with you? And again, it goes back to safety as a provider as well. And another thing that I see publicly is that the definition of strength is off. Like, we think it's strong to not go get help, but it starts with within. So if we're not the best of the best that we can be, how can we be our best to anybody else? That's for your family, your relationship, anything. So it does start within. And so when I reframe it like that for people, then sometimes they are more driven to go get that help because they know, oh, wait a minute. So if I can be less sad, or if I can be more functional, then I can help the people around me, or be a better parent, or be a better lover, or whatever. So for me, to combat that public stigma, I just try to do things like this, like education-wise, and just keep it very real with people. Like, no, you can still talk about these things. This is the only way I'm going to do that, you know? And so we can joke about it, we can laugh, but at the same time, I need you to be real. This is not the place where you come and you say, everything's fine. Like, no, I don't want to hear everything is fine. I want to hear the real. So I just educate people to do that, to utilize when they do get help or talk to their friends, like, it's okay to be real.
So mine actually touches on both of what you're saying. From a military perspective, can you still hear me? Yeah. You know, I mean, like I said, I'm gonna keep beating pride and ego, but it goes back to like what Millie was saying. I've been around a crazy circle of people, right? And I think when people have expectations, they always have these expectations that you just be this, you know, this performance, this image you put on. And I think sometimes we put ourselves in that trap, right? Like I kind of consider myself like this superhuman person that doesn't have any flaws. Like, it was part of me that was doing that because I set those expectations. I just didn't realize I was doing that. And so it's a time to reflect. But everybody expected that. So I was kind of building, you know, it was a public stigma, but I was actually going along with that. Like, yeah, that's right. I'm not supposed to be weak. There's been times I performed with, you know, I got a broken finger still that's got arthritis now because I never got it fixed. You know, and this is just the external stuff, right? but there's so many things that's inside that's broken because I kept going along with this, once again, that toxic stuff, thinking that that's who I have to be. And the public imagery, because of where I was at, hey, this is what we do, man. You cannot do this. We need you. You got to be there no matter if you're sick, nose bleeding, temperature 105 degrees, blah, 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 blah. It don't matter. We still need you. But then when I finally started getting help, I didn't start getting help. Like I said, I did a 26-year career. I didn't start getting help until I was a command sergeant major in a battalion, 24 years in. So think about how much damage that is. That's 2 decades of damage, right? And then I notice as I'm getting this, once again, I'm still fighting this stigma, right? I'm still going along with the stigma. And what I'm noticing, my wife's constantly getting on me like, hey man, are you telling your therapist this? I'm like, nah, because I'm still trying to play tough. Nah, She's like, well, what's the point? What's the point, really, right? And so I found over time, it took about another 2 or 3 years. And to be honest with you, I think maybe last year, after I've been retired for 18 months, I finally started giving my therapist everything that I should have been given a few years back. And I started noticing man, I could have done this a long time ago. It probably would have helped. It's still, I can't go back with the 20 plus years of how long this has gone, but imagine if I didn't do that and I went ahead and went forward what I was planning to do anyway, right? I wouldn't even be in front of you right now. So it's important to be forthright and truthful about everything. And that's something we do have to normalize, because we don't, we still try to play tough. I mean, you got to put it all out there,
Can I say one more thing?
Hey.
So a lot of times we're not even doing that on purpose. It's nervous system stuff. So that's another thing to be aware of with public stigma, because sometimes we'll look at people and we'll be like, why are they not getting help? Don't they see that they need help? And they might see it, but at the same time, their nervous system is not allowing them to do that. If somebody grew up in chaos, joined the military where there's chaos is life. So you mean I need to calm and relax and chill? It doesn't feel good to the body. It doesn't feel good to the nervous system. Healing does not always feel good, but it is good for you.
On the other side, right? Yeah. Now I'm gonna take a quick. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I do want to say something about what you said, and I must say with all due respect, Sergeant Major, right? Because I got 2 command sergeant majors here that I've had conversations with, right? That I want to point out for a reason. You said that you just started being honest with your therapist, a few months back after a bunch of years of just kind of dealing with your own stuff. There's a level of hypocrisy that as leaders, sometimes we exhibit, because I know you, right? And the first day I met you, we connected because you told a story about how one of your soldiers needed help, and you created a safe space for that soldier to talk to you. You took your rank off and you sat down with them and you talked to them, right? So you are, and we do this a lot, right? We do this a lot as leaders, right? Where I'm gonna encourage you to go get help, but you're not willing to do it for yourself, right? Right? We do this a lot, man. And again, that's a good transition into self-stigma, because there are things ingrained in us, right, that kind of keep us from going to get help. And this is a little bit more difficult to challenge, right? And self-stigma comes from within. Self-stigma comes from the titles that you hold dear to your heart, right? Whether it's NCO, whether it's a father, whether it's mentor, businessman, businesswoman, whatever, it can get in the way. For example, I've been doing suicide prevention and mental health since 1999, even as a civilian before I joined the Army. And I know what, expressing your feelings, how good it is, and I talk about it all the time, and I'm encouraging people, express and all that. And a few years ago, I think I told this story before, but it applies to this conversation also. I'm sitting there with my 8-year-old son, 9. He was 9 years old, and watching the movie Selena for the first time. You guys seen Selena? Selena. It's an amazing, fun movie until the last 5 minutes of the movie, right? The whole movie's like, yeah, and then they're like, what? What happened? You know what I'm saying? And my son is sitting there like, beady beady mama, you know what I mean? Like excited, hype, and he moved away from me, got close to the TV, and I'm sitting there like, man, it's gonna hurt, right? You know what I'm saying? And when they the movie goes to the clip of Angelina, 23 years old, died, you know, like was killed. And he was like, she died, and just completely broke down. I'm glad he's not here today. That's why I didn't make him come. I mean, completely breaks down and starts crying. And I saw it coming. I know my kid is emotional, right? Now I'm sitting there holding by my own tears, right? As I'm telling my son, go ahead, let it out, boy. It's okay to cry, man. It's a sad story. But as his father, I am not allowed to let that kid see me cry, because I am a source of strength for my son, right? So stigma keeps me, even though I do this work, right? And this is how difficult self-stigma, how ingrained self-stigma can be, that I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and I still fight through some stuff, right? So now, what are some other examples that you guys have have seen or experienced that apply to self-stigma, things that come from within?
I can start that. Whoa. I'm gonna take my time. So Miguel, when I met Miguel, he was
Miguel story there.
he was a specialist behavioral health, and I said I need help with suicide prevention. So I basically threw him to the wolves.
Literally.
And I said, hey, I need you to conduct some trainings for me. You know, go ahead, go have at it. But what Miguel did for me was he gave me a pause. I was able to kind of decompress, because one of the things about self-stigma for me is because I am a suicide survivor. So like I tell people, who better than the blueprint to help somebody navigate that dark space, right? But I tell people, don't pity me, because I'm an alpha female, so I don't take pity very well. I overcame. I'm a very resilient person. Miguel knows I've been through, when we say it rains, it pours. In my case, I've had tsunami after tsunami. You know, when you hear people say, oh, I got skeletons in my closet, many got area codes, zip codes, it's gravestones with area codes, and thus far, so many things, because I've been through glory, from glory to glory to glory. And it started with that suicide attempt years ago as a young person. 2 years ago, I had breast cancer. And the doctor calls, and he's like, hey, you have positive for inductal carcinoma, invasive carcinoma. And I was like, okay, what's next? And I think it kind of threw him off, how I reacted. So he's like, did you hear what I said? And I said, yes, I'm positive for invasive ductal carcinoma, breast cancer, got it. Did you hear what I asked? What's the next step? And from that moment on, I was like my strongest advocate. Like when I broke the news to my children, I was telling Miguel, my son, who's gonna be 30 this year, broke down crying. And he was like, it's not fair. And I said, life is not fair. But one thing I don't plan to do is fold like a lawn chair. I said, I plan to fight this. And I said, you have to think, mind over matter. We say this in the military all the time, mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter. The suck it up buttercup. But, I had to take a moment to say, Millie, if there is a time where you start feeling, nervous, or you start feeling down, or you're scared, it is okay. It is okay to be vulnerable. You don't have to always be the strong one. What happens with self-stigma is because so many people rely on people like us that they look at us as a rock. But what they don't see is that even rocks, if you notice when a rock has a drop of water that hits it, over time, it does a wedge in the rock. So for those of you that have those strong people, it could be you. Stop looking at folks like you have this perfect life. I kept having a vision of, when I tell people, I give them good counsel and I give them advice and stuff, I look at a garden full of flowers for them. When I look at it for myself, it's barren. So we have to stop always, pouring into other people, and also remember to fill our own cups, because there are times where we get hiccups. And I say Miguel has been my pause, because I've called him in times, and I told him, I said, do you know what's that? I'm a person that helps hundreds and thousands of people, and I cannot recall anyone that I could speed down if I was gonna jump off the bridge. And I felt really, really bad about that because I said I should have a lifeline. Of course, Miguel was like, you know, if you call me, I said, yeah, I know. You might be the one at the bottom of the bridge. Like, go ahead, just jump, get it out your system. I'll wait.
Well, I'm not just the one. That's the thing, though, right? We convince ourselves of that, but I'm not just the one. But we convince ourselves of that because we're scared to ask for help.
Yes.
We're scared to admit that we need help, right? And then we're scared to actually go and get it. You know? So it's complex, right? But it does take courage. And let me tell you something. I had a campaign called Courage is Contagious a few years back, right? Where the reality of it is, if we have the courage to have these conversations, if we have the courage to say, you know what, I remember we did a panel for me, you and I, and it was a first sergeant there, who told his story about how his battle buddy saved his life. This is a first sergeant in front of all his troops, right? When you have the courage to speak on your own struggles, it gives permission to the people behind you, people that look up to you, people in your circles, to go and get help, to say I need help too. You know what I'm saying? So if you are that strong person, if you're that individual that is being looked at as a leader in any sort, any space, not even the military, any space, have the courage to say, you know what, I struggle, right? I'm looking at faces here that I know for a fact. She's telling her story, but she ain't the only one. I struggle all the time. I'm a walking struggle. You know what I'm saying? But does it make me less of a leader? No. We just gotta have the courage to have these conversations, right? Because once we do, once we start acknowledging our own shortcomings, struggles, and then how we overcame things, right? Whether it's on your own or with the help of someone, a friend, a battle buddy, a therapist, whatever it is, share those stories because they have power, right? So now I want to shift the conversation to discussing, actually, any questions on what self-stigma and public stigma look like? Do you have a pretty clear idea on that? Oh, okay, here we go. Right.
So I worked in the SSO, so for people's security clearances kind of thing. So when I first came in the military a few years ago, it actually did affect people's clearance. We'd actually, what we called in the intelligence community, redline them. So they would be removed completely from the skiff. And nowadays we tell soldiers, because it still affects our clearance, we tell them to go to Military One Source, which is fantastic. They get free resources for not just the active duty, but their family members and spouses. And then there's also other free counseling, but as soon as you go to behavioral health, we have to put it in the system. And then the same thing with certain medications for any MOS. It don't matter what type of clearance you have, they get listed that they're on medication. So it's not just a stigma, it's unfortunately a reality that a lot of active duty service members, especially people with TSs, are afraid of dealing with. But we do brief it, because I went through the suicide, because when I was at NJIC, I went through the suicide, I was in charge of our brigade's suicide program. So we definitely do brief, like, hey, these are all the available services, because we want to make sure everybody's getting the help that they need, but we don't want them to lose their clearance.
Can I say,
don't want to lose their job.
so here's the thing about that though, right? I work in Fort Meade, so if you don't know, that's all I deal with is TS folks,
Yeah.
right? Like they don't want to go see anybody because they're gonna lose their job. A couple of things there, right? If I'm a pilot, if I'm an intel analyst, right, intelligence analyst, and I haven't slept in 3 months because I'm grieving the loss of my father or something like that, right? I'm putting national security at risk. If I'm a pilot and I'm hallucinating, I should not be flying a plane. You understand? So there are times where that we have to understand why those clearances get put on hold or get removed. Now, this is the problem. When a soldier is struggling through something, and I'm speaking about soldiers, but I know that this translates to the veteran community as well, right? The same thing. If I'm a soldier struggling through something and my clearance needs to get pulled, what is my leadership doing to take care of me, right? Once I gotta come out of that skiff, what are they doing to ensure that I feel like I'm part of the team? Because what happens is we put them in holdover status, we make them feel like they're less than. We look at it, you might as well put a freaking a vest over it that says, no clearance, you know what I mean? Like, you might as well, right? So we have to do a better job of explaining the situations to them, explaining why the clearance is gonna be on hold or removed or whatever, but then do a better job of supporting those soldiers, because they're still soldiers, even if they're getting out of the Army. You know how many suicidal attempts I've seen in my installation just because people feel that they don't want to get out the Army and they just blew a career making 6 figures when they got out because they lost their clearance. We have to do a better job of supporting those soldiers and people in general that are struggling through stuff because that's life. Life is going to freaking happen. Nobody's going to be perfect. There are things that are going to happen sometimes that are going to require the clearance to be taken away, or the marriage to get dissolved, or the job to get, you get fired, you move on to another job. Whatever it is, that's life. How do we show up for each other in those moments, though? That's the difference. So thank you for bringing that up. And you had a question?
I just want to make sure we touch up on MST, military sexual trauma, because yes, that can be something that is a stigma to that person, but of course they don't, and it's not just females, it's males. I worked in a military hospital, and I know some men that got raped and things like that. But I think that's very important that we talk about that as well. The support that, in the military, you don't necessarily get that support. You don't necessarily feel that you can come and talk about these things. It's more than just sometimes that stigma.
I'm gonna let you speak on it briefly, right? But this is great question, but I do want to make sure that for the sake of this conversation and what we're talking about, we don't dive into military sexual trauma, because I don't know who's in the audience and I don't know what it can do to some people. So, and I'm not trying to dismiss, it's a great question, but I want to make sure that you kind of touch on it, but we don't want to dive into that because I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Making sense with this? All right.
Yeah, I think when I hear MST and that comes up, and thank you for also mentioning Military One Source, because that's a wonderful resource. Sometimes MST and suicide go hand in hand because there's not a lot of options. I've seen people who move their duty station to here, they get seen at Walter Reed, and the same thing happens at their new duty station. So they feel like they don't have any options. Now we're talking about suicide prevention. So it can have some overlap, but I think definitely the resources that are out there, like Military One Source, I partner with the Headstrong Project. They do 30 free trauma sessions for veterans and people transitioning out, like just using those type of things. So it can't, so I think this still hits the purpose of suicide prevention without going into that specifically, but the resources are still there and it's still a very serious topic.
We'll touch on that, Donnell. We gotta just prepare for that conversation a little bit deeper, but it's necessary. And next month is Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Month, so it might be a good thing to discuss. Okay, so now, what any other questions? No? All right, cool. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Yes, perhaps this question is directed to yourself, being that you've been out there in the sandbox and in harm's way, where you've got folks that are, behind closed doors, like battling, having these internal conflicts, and perhaps, dealing with the potential to go and harm themselves. Have you seen it on the other side of the spectrum, where you've got folks out there with the weapon and they've got challenges, or they got problems at home or at the job, and they're just really, really gung-ho, and they're putting their souls out, perhaps even carelessly out there, perhaps even catch a bullet because they just want to, end their life, but they want to do it in that manner. So it's kind of like on the opposite side of the spectrum. They're just out there, guns are blazing, only because they're so distraught inside. They've got all these issues and challenges inside, and that's their way of actually dealing with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question too. I think, everybody thinks special operations is sexy because it is, right? Everybody wants to do it. It's cool. You see the movies about it. Everybody wants to jump out of planes. Everybody wants to do the crazy things, right? But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's some people, and this sounds crazy when I'm saying this, but that's probably what makes them extremely dangerous and great at their jobs, because they're willing to do the stuff that nobody else wants to do, right? Like, who wants to who jumps out of planes in here? All right, exactly. You might be a little crazy. I don't know. Nah, I'm playing. But no, to answer your question, I think it's more than we know and more than we can imagine. It's something we've seen, but we won't know about it sometimes until hindsight, right? We won't know until the back end, and we start looking at the signs. Because reality is, in that world, everything moves fast. You're not really, you're paying attention, but not really. You'll have the talks, but you're not really starting to dissect. Now, I will say, in these last maybe decade or whatever, we have really received a lot of leaders in that pipeline that are starting to think outside the box, that are starting to like really dissect things and say, hey, look, I know you got a divorce. I know you lost a child. I know you lost a parent. I know something's happened. I know you didn't make it through this whatever school. And they're starting to put all these things together and they're starting to notice. I would say that a lot of our leaders are getting very smart and very hip to that because it's a generational change. This newer generation is starting to get better at that. But the unfortunate thing is you don't catch everything because at the end of the day, depending on the mission, depending on the location, and that's where it gets a little bit, the gray area, right? You do the best you can because some of those guys and gals that are doing that stuff, there's a reason why they're doing it because the life expectancy is kind of, that's kind of part of the game. Doesn't make it right. And that's why, you were mentioning some stuff and I was about to take you there before we got into the question. That's why as leaders, man, we gotta be really be more unorthodox and unconventional about how we nurture our people. And you'll never really hear the word nurture. You never really hear, because it's too soft, right? It sounds like parenting.
I say mentor.
Yeah, we want to put mentor on everything. And I'm saying right now, I was never really until most recently, I wasn't really a big fan of the word mentor. I used to tell folks, I had one of the team guys ask me when I first got the 5th Special Forces Group out in Fort Campbell some years ago. He was like, man, I want to talk to you and figure out how you got your team the way you did. I was like, man, I'm going to tell you something that might not make sense to you, but I lead the way I saw my parents raise me. So what you're seeing right now is something that's not in a book, but I was blessed to have good parents, good grandparents. I had a community, right? And so I figured as I kept going on in my career, more senior I got, I had an opportunity to change the game and change the stigma. So I'm not going to lead the way doctrine necessarily tells me to lead because there's a lot of gaps. We're missing things. I want to touch your soul. I want to figure out who you are. I want to figure out everything about you, what makes you tick. Because if I can know all those things, it will help me be able to see like, hey, hold up. You're moving too fast. Yeah. And right now you're putting the mission at risk. Yeah. You're putting other people at risk. And if something happens to you, we got to go come get you out. So it's something I would like to stress to everybody, no matter what line of work you're in, think about it, like, whether you had good parenthood or not, or you experienced good parenthood or not, just think about what you think would be the right thing to do for your people. You got to really just kind of step outside the lines and boundaries of what you think that looks like. If you had a leader that didn't do certain things for you, then change it up. When you become a leader, you have an opportunity to go do those things. Nothing says you can't do it. And for the ones that's telling you can't do it, you might have the wrong leader that's in charge of you. And I don't like to call them leaders, I call them people in leadership positions. Because the word leader is something we throw around real loosely these days. Everybody ain't a leader. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're a leader, man, you're doing some of everything. If you leave your job, your career at the end of the day and go home and you still got a lot of energy, you weren't doing it right. When you walk out of your spot and you have people that are under you, you need to be walking out of there exhausted because you've done everything you can that makes you check on the well-being of your people.
On the outside. Then your question is a good segue to, I'm sorry, man, you something?
I did.
Go ahead.
What you're actually talking about is what we would call in this field high-risk behaviors. Yeah. When we look at high-risk behaviors, is certain behaviors that are displayed with certain individuals that put people at risk. Okay, so what you were mentioning is what I saw in the 90s when I was a soldier. When we saw certain soldiers come back from deployment, there was a rush. So they have all this adrenaline, and now they're at a garrison or a force com or a MACOM, and they're telling them, slow down, be quiet, be calm. But you were downrange, banging, and high alert, hyper focused, and now you're back in the home front, and they're telling you to be Betty Crocker. And that's very hard to do for a lot of us, to come and switch. So especially for those of us that served, in the 90s era where it was a continuous adrenaline rush. I remember carrying my TA-50 in the back of my vehicle because we were on 2-hour recall. So, it was a different time. And you didn't tell your...
TA-50 is like your kid.
Okay, I'm sorry, my bad. The equipment that a soldier carries that, ends up putting us disabled veterans with back injuries, knee injuries, and
Plantar fasciitis.
yeah, all that. So with high-risk behaviors, when we look at high-risk behaviors, you look at environmental, you look at what's happening within a unit, environment, socially, and so forth, because we've had suicides that were by cops. The person was suicidal, they reacted, and cops came out to a situation of a mental harm, and instead of de-escalating it, escalated, and now they die by suicide by cop. They get the cops to shoot them, and that now they've, so it's technically, but so again, that adrenaline rush that you're talking about sometimes is, survivor's guilt. Why did I come back and my battle buddies are left in the battlefield? Vietnam vets went through this, World War I, World War II. A lot of previous people before us went through this, where they saw and they held their friends taking their last breath, and then they're coming back to the home front and told to be nice. When we were designed to be killers. That's what we were designed to do. When we joined the military, they created us to be killers.
After you grew up in Harlem.
Well, that was my first duty station. No.
Basic training.
125th Street. Hey, you know what? This is a good segue though into what I want to discuss next. And I know we're running short on time, but how do we fight stigma, right? And one of the things is education, right? Learning and understanding where the stigma comes from. And when you were asking your question, Mr. Torres, it made me think about the fact that when you're downrange, right? And I won't speak to the ones acting deranged or acting, erratic, but there are people downrange that might not show emotion, right? That might be like, oh, your wife just left you, or your husband just left you, and took all your money, and you show no sort of emotions, and you just keep the mission going. A lot of times, that's survival. You're downrange, you don't have time to grieve, you don't have time to process that. You gotta stay alert, stay alive to make it back to your family, right? So there's that aspect of it. To expand that to a more a societal issue, then you have the people that might be struggling with mental health issues, might be struggling with not even mental health. I wouldn't even take it that far. I would say struggling through something, a life change, an emotional grief, a medical problem, whatever it is. And for a lot of people, and I'll be specific to men, but not exclusive to men, a lot of times it's easier to show anger than it is to show sadness, right? So society will accept me more as that 6'7", black Dominican dude. If I punch a hole in the wall because my father died, rather than me sitting down here breaking down and I need a hug, which is really what I need, right? So we express ourselves in ways that are messed up, right? Because it's gonna land us in jail or killed or something, right? But it's more accepted than me breaking down and saying, I need help. I'm making sense with this? Which is the education piece. Once we start acknowledging that and learning about that, we can start making changes in a way that is productive. So what I don't want to do is like, well, you're not showing any emotions. You're wrong for that, Simon Major. You don't want to do that because it becomes there's going to be a defensiveness there automatic. So understanding where the stigmas come from is going to help us deconstruct them. Make sense? What are some other ways that you guys can recommend or show us to fight stigma? What are some things that the audience can do to fight stigma? Doctor.
Okay, so you just made me think of something. We all have like these bad habits that we do, right? Like whether it's suicidality, violence, rage, alcoholism, any addiction you can think of. Like there is something in all of us that we do, and it doesn't mean that we're not talking about good or bad. We're talking about what we do when something in us, something touches our pain. And so when we have that pain and you see those other behaviors come up, we have to understand why we do that. So part of breaking the stigma when we talk about like education and other ways, I think it's just knowing yourself better. What do you do when something touches your pain that you might label a bad habit? But if we take out the good and bad, just what do you do? How do you respond when something hurts you? and look at it. And what is it trying to tell you? Because if you slow down and you listen, we're talking about suicide prevention, so I'm gonna talk about suicidality. When you have suicidal thoughts, there's something those thoughts are trying to do for you. What is it trying to do? What is it trying to tell you? What is the information that you can gather from that? And if you look at it that way, no judgment, literally, what is it trying to tell me? It's gonna try to tell you that you have pain somewhere, that it hurts. And then so what you do from there, might look different for each and every person. But I think understanding that is where we can really make those changes. Oh, I did this and that was out of character for me. So what was going on? Something was going on, especially if that's not you all the time.
And if you have a hard time figuring that out on your own, that's why therapists exist, right? I just want to make sure, right? Because a lot of times you're going to go home and try to figure it out. And if you have a hard time with that, that's why we have therapists. That's why we have, social workers and counselors, right? Okay, what else?
And I would say foster an environment that feels safe to talk. When I say foster an environment, for those of you that are leaders, and I know it's loosely thrown, but if you're a supervisor or a manager, then this is something that you should make into practice, put into practice, where you put that out there to your team. Because I tell you, when you have a team that feels confident and secure with the person they work with, you have a thriving team. That team will, the catapult that will happen as far as the work, the products that come out of your space is amazing when you give that amount of latitude and bandwidth to people to say, hey, if you're not okay, I got your six. Like my license plate says I got your six, and I live it. I don't just say it out my mouth. I walk it every day because I want the person behind me to know that you matter. I want you here. I don't need a t-shirt to tell you that. I want to speak it out my mouth, and I want to show it by the actions. So when we tell people I care, it has to mean something really enough for them to feel safe to talk to you. So connection is a very important piece of fostering, a safe environment. You want to connect with people. I call it the superficial talk, cafeteria talk. When you go to work and everybody's like, hey, you come from a Friday weekend, whatever, Monday morning. Hey, how was your weekend? Oh, it was good. When I was a mental health specialist, my clients, I would say, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling good. And I'm like, so what does good look like? And you got to get people to really expand. We got to get away from that little superficial, Cafe Bustelo, I'm giving you that little bit of milk. We got to expand. We got to expand. What does that mean? How really are you doing? And tell them, if you notice something, tell that person, listen, the reason I'm asking, are you okay? Is because this is what I've noticed in you lately. You've coming in, you used to say good morning, you're not saying good morning. You used to be dressed up, all of a sudden, you're kind of throwing off your dress game. What's really going on? I'm here for you. I would like to know what's happening. And then when someone's actively suicidal, what can I do for you today? What can I do for you right now to help you decide to live? We got to ask the tough questions, and we got to be prepared for Pandora's box.
So transparency, that's a big word for me, transparency. The biggest thing I think I did in my last year of command position I was in was to be transparent. And that's when Miguel, he and I really connected, was when I gave my story to my formation. When I told my soldiers everything that I had going on with me in that brief moment, it opened the floodgates of emotion, and it let my soldiers know that, hey, look, Sergeant Major is a human being. I had never done that before, and I'm like, you know what, this is the time. I have a lot of young soldiers that are looking up to me. They want to see everything that's going on. And I remember one time at the gym, one soldier came to me. It was like maybe 7 o'clock in the evening. He was like, Sergeant Major, how do you do it? I'm like, what? You got family, you got school, you're in the gym, you're doing this, da-da-da. I'm like, trust me, you don't even know what I got going on. And that piece right there told me, like, when the time came and opportunity was perfect, when they had a briefing that Miguel and his team was hosting.
I ain't got no team, it's just me.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. Never mind. But yeah, I found that opportunity when he was in the room. You know, I was like, hey, I got something to say. He allowed me to speak. And when I said that, it was crazy because, you know, soldiers came to me crying on the back end. And I think went to Miguel as well to express what they had going on. I was like, you know, I didn't really realize what was going on. I think I was more emotional that they were crying. I'm crying. I feel like I'm their daddy, you know. And, you know, Miguel came to me afterwards. She was like, man, you don't even understand what you did. And I didn't. I didn't. You know, I took time to reflect on it. I'm like, you know what? That's the problem right there. People that are in leadership positions are not taking the time to be transparent, you know, taking that chip off the shoulder, letting know you're cool, and letting everybody know what's going on. Because we all got something going on. But the problem is a lot of our, you know, our children, our you know, our younger colleagues or younger soldiers, younger whatever, they don't know, you know, because you hide a lot of that stuff. So they think the world you live in is perfect.
Yes.
Because that's what I used to think. When I was coming up, I thought all my senior leaders were just perfect. Until I started seeing them getting DUIs. Right? I heard somebody got, you know, they beat their wife. Somebody, you know, did whatever. And I'm like, hold up, what in the world? Oh man, these numbers are just as jacked up as I am. You know what I'm saying? So when I finally got to my position of authority, I was like, you know what? This is time. I gotta let everybody know what I got going on. And to be honest with you, I think it gave my soldiers more respect for me. Because no longer was I this superhuman, whatever fictional character. Now I'm a real guy with real pain, real issues, and I was sharing it. Hey, my mother's going through dementia. I got this going on. It's like, dang, so I mean you got all that going on, and you're still performing. And I'm like, you know what? Damn, I guess so. I'm showing up. And so, you know, it's been a learning experience right now, right? I've learned to kind of dig in and find out a little bit more about me. But transparency is what helped me on my process. Because my therapist was doing one thing, right? But me being transparent, me being honest, me being open about everything is now something I preach to everybody that I come across on their journey. Like, hey, if you want to go get help, you got to do this. And also, if you don't mind, share your story. Because you can help save somebody else, you know? So that's all I got on that one.
You know, a lot of times, I'll come to you, but a lot of times it's important to know that our stories are not ours to keep. Right? Our stories can save somebody's, and mind you, that's not saying that if you're not ready to share it, you share your story. Like, it's not a forced situation. But I think, like, even in your case, it came at you didn't expect to speak that day. But I spoke for about 50 minutes. He spoke for about 5. And his 5 minutes were way more important, way more impactful than anything I had to say. Why? Because Simon Major has the ranks, the tabs, right? The leadership status to where those soldiers want to be like, they don't want to be like me. They want to be like him, right? But when he opens up, for somebody that I want to be like, has problems also, overcame this also, can share stuff also, that's powerful, right? Yeah. And whether you're wearing the uniform or not, you're going to be in spaces where you're leading, whether it's your children, whether it's your family members, your friends, your basketball team, the team that you coach, Little League, whatever it is, you have the power to influence change. Now, don't go telling your stories because you want to just tell your story. Yeah. It's got to have a purpose, right? Make sure that it meets the need of the population, of the demographic you're serving, but there's power in sharing your stories.
You gave them permission. That's what you did. You gave them permission to be able to be vulnerable and be open and transparent because you started the transparency. So one of the things I used to do at Belvoir, I used to give a t-shirt that said, your story's not over, with the semicolon. Right. The semicolon.
My website, come back.
So I tell people, your story is not over. The reason I say your story is not over because sometimes we think that our stories are insignificant or because we have overcome that we can't help people. But we surely can by helping because that story that you have, whether it's 30 years ago, may be the very thing that somebody needs to release them from that bondage that they're living in. So I will leave you with this, and Miguel knows because I shared it with Ariel the last time I spoke. They've been after me to write this book. My title will be, I've already done the outline. It's gonna go from victim to survivor to conqueror. The reason for that is because victim, I didn't choose to be a victim. The trauma chose me. I didn't choose my trauma. This is usually what happens. Trauma happens and we're stuck in it. Then I moved into the survivor phase, right? Survivor phase, we all know this well. We wake up, we put on our clothes, we put a poker face, we smile through the pain. That is the survivor mode. And you stay in that mode, it could be 1 month, it could be 2 years, it could be 10 years. Where I'm at now is at a conqueror stage. The conqueror stage is the stage where you have overcome and healed from the trauma. Meaning, I can tell you my stuff, which I won't, not today. But I can speak on each of the traumas I've had in my life, and they invoke no emotion because I am now healed. And this is my wish for everyone that I meet across, that I want you to get to a point where you're healed and you conquer those demons. Because when you conquer your demons, then you really will be able to help others around you. It's very hard to share trauma, like Ariel said. You got to be mindful who you're sharing your story with, because there is such a thing as trauma bonding. And if you get trauma bonding, you won't heal and you won't help the individual you're sharing. You're thinking you're helping them, but you're doing more damage. It's toxic. Okay. And I'll leave it with that. I'm sorry. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, you're good. All right. Challenge, right? You educate yourself. We provide supportive environments, but there are going to be times when you got to challenge the stigmas, right? Like the best example I can give is every Friday when I go to the barbershop, right? There's no place as fun yet toxic as a black and brown barbershop. You know what I mean? I just keep it real, right? And there are times where people just will say things that are just not true, right? And it's okay in those spaces to say, nah, you're wrong, right? Or give you testimony a little bit. So you're calling me crazy. I remember one time I was doing a team building class for the Marion Barry Leadership Academy. These are young men and women that were transitioning from high school to the workforce. And I was doing a little team building exercise for them. And one of the exercises was, you gotta pick 6 people to repopulate the earth. Pick out of these 12, and one of them was a Iraq veteran, or whatever it was, OIF veteran. And everybody across the board was like, nah, we don't want to pick them because they're crazy. They didn't know I was a veteran, right? So after we go through the debrief or whatnot, I said, well, what if I told you that I'm a Army veteran? What? Right? So there are spaces and places where you're going to be able to challenge what is being said in a very blunt way. Right? And when you do that, what you're doing is you're creating a safe space for somebody in that audience. Right? Even when and this is not, Karen? Yes. This is not at all like a dig on you, but when you brought up MST, right? We had to have the courage to say, okay, no, we can't talk about that because somebody might be, and somebody might have felt supported. I don't know who it is, but somebody might have felt supported in that moment because we're being cautious, we're being gentle with each other. All right? So educate yourself so that you can fight stigma from a level of knowledge, right? Provide supportive environments, and challenge when needed. But I also say this, and I don't want to start talking too much because I'm gonna get a little emotional. So stop now. I want to, like cry in front of people. All right.
That's what we got, Ariel.
All you gotta do, man, right? If you don't remember anything else today, is do 2 things for me, right? Show up for yourself. Wherever you are in your journey, right? You don't have to be healed. You don't have to be a conqueror like my sister here. You don't have to have it all figured out. But wherever you are, be gentle, be kind, and acknowledge yourself and where you are in your journey. And the other thing is, do not isolate yourself. Whatever you're going through, the last thing you want to do is try to figure it out on your own. Yeah, you can do it, but there's power in perspective. There's power in community. Even if I think I have a great idea, if I run it by Millie or Simon Major, like, they might give me some idea that might make it better. Me and you have a conversation all the time, Nate. We talk all the time about ways to make it better. Me and Donnell, every time I see Donnell, it's like, I walk away from the conversation feeling like, okay, I'm gonna tweak it a little bit, right? So allow people in your community to help you, to support you, to show up for you, and be that person. Be that person for somebody else. Show up for them. If somebody comes to you with a problem, don't dismiss them. Be aware of your own bandwidth, but by all means, if you have it in you, man, show up for people, man, because that's how we get better as a community. Right? Especially in the veteran community, we have a problem with this, man. It's crafts and apparel sometimes, man, and we gotta do a little bit better than that. All right? You have anything else for them?
I do. I always debate like how much to share or how much not to share, but I feel like I want to share. So for me, when my time in the service, when I was serving, I ended up experiencing the biggest loss of my life, which was my daughter. She had a congenital heart disease that does not have a cure. That time, my thought process was that I have to be sad forever. That's it. This is it for me. And to interrupt that thought process, I needed community. And if I didn't have community, then I would not be sitting here in front of you today.
A doctor.
A doctor. And that's how important it is, because I can sit here and I can speak about that time in my life. I had 3 losses: my daughter, then my father, not even 3 months later, and then a divorce. A necessary ending, but still a loss. So those things happen all at once while serving in the military, not having the support I needed. That's what fuels my mission, because I will not let another vet be without like I was. So to change that narrative, I needed to tell people. I needed community. I needed to tell people that I was hurting and I didn't know what to do. And so sometimes we don't have all the answers, but telling that person they can hug you, you can sort of figure out what the next step is. My first choices for coping were not healthy, but I learned. And because I know that now, I share with you all, one of the worst things that I think can happen to a human being is they lose their kid to a death. And that happened to me, and I'm okay. But I'm only okay because I did the work. So I just wanted to say that, not for you to feel sorry for me, but so that I can encourage you that no matter what you go through, you are still becoming, and that's hope.
I'm gonna let this here for a minute. All right. That's every time you say that story, man, I got a little choked up. But one thing that you said was doing the work, right? I think it's important to remember that also. You're gonna see a therapist, so you're gonna go get professional help, and you're gonna see them once a week, at best, once every 2 weeks, maybe once a month. You still have to walk out of those spaces with whatever homework or whatever guidance or whatever advice they gave you and apply it to your real life. Therapy is a check. I always say this: therapy is nothing more than a check-in. You go in, you check in. Is this working? No, it's not working. Let's try this. But then you gotta go out. You gotta leave that session and actually apply what you learned, right? For you to do better and be better. So you have to do the work. Okay, so let's do that, man. Let's go out there and be the best version of ourselves, and let's keep on improving individually and as a community. I want to thank my panelists, man. It's a great conversation. I think we're gonna go on tour. I think the 4 of us, we might go on tour. We might do it this summer, man. But at this point, I would like to. We don't have a lot of time. I know that I want to go home, but any questions from the audience before we close out? LT.
How effective, how adequate do you find the ACE program, the ACE training that we get in the Army, and how does that play into stigma?
Chill out.
Trigger something. Yeah.
Well, it's not fair for me to say, because I am the ACE program in the Army right now. So that's what I do for a living. So it's not fair for me to tell you. But it's not the program that's the problem, it's the people that are the problem. Right? When the problem is that any curriculum that they put in front of you is going to have flaws. Right? It's up to the person teaching it to actually take those slides and apply them, right, to make it make sense for who's teaching it and humanize it, right, and do things a little bit differently. So the program itself is great, but it can always be better. But this is the best we've seen. Like, as far as curriculum goes, this is the best we've had in the 17 plus years that I've been around the Army. The problem is that some of the people that are leading the programs and teaching it are not very effective.
I think also for different brains work different ways.
Yeah.
So if you have one program, that's great that we have something and that it keeps improving, but each brain works differently. So it might not it might work perfectly for him, but for me, I don't get it. So I think that's what we run into when we have standardized programs like that too. Yeah. Although they're good and they help.
But that's why it comes down to the person teaching the class to make those adjustments in real time. And a lot of folks, you want to go out there and read slides and make it like a train. It's not a training. We're saving lives out here, right?
Yeah.
So we got to take a little bit.
It's a conversation. Yeah. Ask, Care, Escort is what ACE stands for. And he knows the reason I jumped, because when I was suicide prevention, I tweaked my slides. And I kept adjusting and changing, and each command that I would get ready to train, I tweaked the slides to accommodate the audience, my focus group, okay, to target, okay, and I'm gonna go back to faith. I'm a person of faith. I tell people, you can read the Bible sun up, sun down, and you could spit out every verse in the Bible. But if you don't apply it, it means nothing. It's the same thing with curriculums. You can't put a one size fits all cookie cutter. Yes, we have a great curriculum, but it's how it's taught and how it's implemented and then executed. You got to put things into action. You know, I could tell you again, as a mental health, person, advocate, I could tell you sun up, sun down, all the beautiful things that you can do to get better. But if you don't apply it, then it's just wasted space. It's wasted air that I've given you, because it's not, until you don't absorb it and implement it in your life, like she said, put it into action, doing things out of habit, where it becomes a part of you and natural. These things will continue to happen. We'll still see numbers spiking in the military.
Right.
And just something to go along with that too. So, you know, with the ACE program, we select members to go attend the training to be representation back in organizations. The problem I see is we don't do talent management for the people that we send to this stuff. Not everybody's meant to go teach. I'm gonna be honest with you, right? Like, and we gotta stop that. And that's for military, civilian stuff, whatever. Not everybody's meant to go do a job, you know, but some people want to go do it because it looks good on a resume, looks good on the eval, looks good on a portfolio. Nah, if you're not the one, I don't want you teaching this message to my formation, to my people, because you're not going to do it any justice. And so that's what we got. In order to make it effective, we got to put the right people in the right place to do the mission, to get it done effectively. Not just do it. Don't check a block. The right people for the right mission. We got to make sure we start, you know, you say like customized or tailor-made. Nah, we got, that's what I think we're failing right now in the military, or even in corporations. We're not putting the right people in the right places. That's part of the biggest problem right there. Because the program can work. We just got the wrong people doing the job.
And also follow up, checks. You know, in the military, we do check and balance. Leaders gotta go and see these people when they're training, when they're doing out there, you know, when they're out there talking to the audience. You need to be watching from time to time so you can give feedback. Hey, you know, maybe you shouldn't have said this. Or if you can't do it, then get your suicide prevention program, you know, folks that are at the installation level. Hey, I need y'all to come and monitor my folks when they do their training. Because again, we only get better if we have the right people giving us the feedback. I was not always, now I took my horn, I'm one of the greatest SPPMs.
Top two.
I trained him, if he didn't tell you, but I started somewhere where somebody gave me feedback. Hey, Miss Millie, you need to, you know, maybe not say this, or maybe do it this way. And so I started tweaking and practicing, and I got to the point where I wouldn't even look at my slides. Because there's no disrespect to a person more than somebody who comes and tells you to come into my space and I'm going to read slides to you when I could have just emailed it to you.
And I also think that's why it's important, like even as leadership, that you pour from the overflow after you've filled your cup. Because if we are giving and giving and giving, then we can't even show up at our greatest because we're tired, because we're overwhelmed, because we put ourselves last.
That's what I am again.
Yeah, fact. I'm gonna tell you this so they can hear me, because I know you and I know you're gonna do this anyway. But as an officer, be involved, be engaged, right? Like don't be the leader that sends their soldiers to suicide prevention training, but you don't show up. Because that training is one thing, but the environments you create outside of that 1 hour training, that's where the change actually happens, right? And leadership trickles down. If you care about the topic, the people under you are going to be forced to care. Even if they fake it at first, at some point it becomes part of the culture. Right? So, again, I know you, so I know you're going to be a type of leader, man. I'm very confident of that. But make sure that not only you change or you take charge, but you hold your battle buddies accountable. Right? That's where change happens, man. Anybody else? More questions? Thank you, Dee. Any other questions?
Oh, no, I taught the suicide prevention at 2 different units. I was just going to tell them, like you were saying, a lot of it has to do with the leadership's involvement and also the participation. When I was at Benning, I had people come in just want to sign their names showing that they were there, but when I was at NJIC, because actually she came down there one time, we actually got small groups and stuff, and it was such a huge difference of the environment and how the classes were run, because our colonel was actively involved in all of our classes.
So was I okay when I came to training?
Stop putting your own horn.
You
man. Stop
actually
looking for
came to my
compliments.
suicide prevention event too, so, because we had the ARD sergeant major speak at that event too, so.
Thank you for that. Any other questions?
I was just gonna make a comment. I know since we're talking about suicide, I think it's also important because I've heard you guys talk about, you know, you're a therapist and whatever, but also that therapists need to have their own therapist,
Facts.
right? Because we burn out, there are therapists who commit suicide, because we take a lot of stuff in, right? And we care. So I think it's also important that we touch upon that as well.
Sure,
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your time. I hope you guys got something out of this conversation, and we look forward to doing it again. Thank you, Donnell, Tonda, VA, for giving us a platform.
Which one worked the best?
That one's good.
This one works?
Oh, yeah.
Let's give them a round of applause one more time. This was a very, very tough topic for a lot of people in this room, but you guys made it really easy, really palatable, and I hope that everybody got something out of this that they can take and put in their toolbox to use, because we're all in the people business, right? We got people at home that we got to take care of. We got people at work that we have to take care of. Even people that you pass by or in the shopping center standing next to, you never know what those people are going through. You know, just be a steward of taking care of people, especially in today's world. So thank you, panel. Thank y'all for supporting Veterans Growing America and the work that we're doing. I have t-shirts for y'all in the back. I didn't want to take an hour to give these things away, and plus, we'll work it out. So let's give them a round of applause one more time. We're going to do a couple of things. I want to do a couple recognitions here real quick.